Hello everyone. Today we will examine Hadu 13 of the Blueprint record. First, the introductory pointer says, as clouds gather across the fields, the entire world becomes wrapped in clouds. And as snow covers the leaves, their traces can no longer be distinguished. What is cold is as cold as ice and snow. And what is subtle is as subtle as powdered dust. What is deep is difficult even for the Buddha's eye to penetrate. And what is minute cannot be perceived even by heavenly demons and outsiders. To mention one thing and understand three may be admirable enough, but if one wishes to silence the tongues of all people under heaven, how should one speak? Tell me, what sort of a person could bear such a task? Let us test this by bringing up a Hadu. This is today's Hadu. A monk asked Parung Hogam, what is the essential teaching of the Venerable Jeva? Parung replied, snow heaped in a silver bowl. This dialogue is the Hadu for today. Who is the Venerable Jeva referred to here? Within the traditional lineage of Zen Buddhism, Jeva is regarded as the fifth patriarch. The lineage is traditionally presented as follows. Shakyamuni, Mahakāshyapa, continuing onward through the generations to Yongsu as the 14th patriarch, then Jeva as the 5th patriarch, and eventually to Bodhidharma as the 28th patriarch, followed later in China by Henan as the 6th patriarch. Thus, within the Zen tradition, Jeva is not regarded merely as a philosophical commentator, but as one of the patriarchs who transmitted the Buddha's mind shield. The question asked here is therefore directed towards an awakened patriarch. What is your essential teaching? Or what is the essence of Buddhism? Or what was the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from the West? Or what is the great meaning of the Buddha Dharma? In other words, it is a classic Zen question concerning the very core of the Buddha's transmitted teaching. Here, Parung belonged to the Master Unmon's lineage of Zen, a school famous for its brief and compressed language. answers that pierce directly to the heart with a single phrase and symbolic imagery. True to the style of the Master Unmun tradition, the master leads people beyond conceptual discrimination and into profound silence through a response that is both poetic and symbolic. Snow heaped in a silver bowl. If a silver bowl is filled with snow, both the bowl and the snow are white and difficult to distinguish. Yet, the silver bowl and the snow are not actually the same thing. Difference and non-difference appear together. Suddenly, language comes to an end, and before us arises the image of snow, quietly gathered upon a silver bowl in the depths of winter. What exactly was Parang trying to convey? Quadruplectis is in some ways similar to a hidden picture puzzle. In such puzzles, one may be told to find the hidden banana or football within a drawing. And people search the picture over and over, trying to locate it. At first, they cannot find it at all, but eventually they exclaim with delight, "Ah, there it is!" Of course, such games are simple and often easily solved, although sometimes the hidden image remains difficult to find, causing one to continue searching carefully, convinced that it must be there somewhere. Quadruplectis is similar in the sense that one must discover the intention of the Zen master. What did the Zen master mean when he said snow in a silver bowl? What intention lay behind those words? Surely he answered with a purpose, intending to communicate something. Therefore, one continues questioning and doubting, asking what meaning the words contain. Yet, quadruplectis is fundamentally different from hidden picture games. In hidden picture puzzles, one searches by observing, comparing, analyzing shapes and positions through the senses. But Quadru investigation does not proceed by sensory comparison or intellectual analysis. Rather, sensory activity gradually quiets down while the mind becomes increasingly lucid, subtle, and still. Within that stillness, one sustains the great doubt, continuously asking, What does this mean? One does not analyze. One does not analyze intellectually, but concentrates wholly upon the doubt itself. Moreover, Hwadu practice is not something anyone can simply take up casually because it sounds interesting. There is an essential prerequisite for this practice. When you speak of a spiritual practitioner, we mean one who has aroused aspiration, one who has generated raising the mind for enlightenment or arousing aspiration. Without such aspiration, true Zen practice is difficult. Hidden picture games can be played casually whenever one is bored. But how to practice cannot be approached with the attitude. Perhaps I'll try this sometime. At the end of all learning stands Buddhism. And at the end of Buddhism stands Zen. The phrase arousing aspiration is short for arousing the mind of enlightenment, meaning the awakening of the determination to realize enlightenment. One must first possess the fundamental understanding that true human freedom is fulfilled only through awakening. Then, what should the state of mind of such a practitioner be? We are not speaking here of one who is already enlightened, but of one who has just begun the path. To understand this, we may recall what the Buddha told the disciple Subhuti. When Subhuti asked what kind of a mind one who has generated arousing aspiration should maintain, the Buddha replied that such a person should abide in the vow to lead all sentient beings to unsurpassed, complete awakening. One cannot cling to worldly desires while sitting and repeating Hwadu. What is this? Hoping thereby to attain enlightenment. This practice is not about accumulation and achievement, but about relinquishment, letting go again and again. There is an old story of a Zen practitioner who spent 10 years practicing in the mountains and eventually forgot even the road by which he had entered. Those who think I will awaken within 3 years, or I will attain enlightenment within 10 years, have already gone astray from the beginning. One must stake everything upon the practice. Whether enlightenment comes or not, one simply continues wholeheartedly without ulterior motive. Nowadays, quietly observing the breath or sitting in relaxation is often called meditation. And such practices may certainly be beneficial, but Zen is something else entirely. Zen is not a hobby for one's spare time, nor a kind of spiritual tourism for the weekend. All one's concern must gather upon the heart. This does not merely mean practicing diligently. It means that one's whole life becomes oriented toward the question. At the foundation of such practice stand the four great vows. That is, sentient beings are without number. I vow to liberate them all. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to cut through them all. Dharma teachings are boundless. I vow to study them all. The Buddha way is unsurpassed. I vow to realize it. When practice rests upon these vows, attention naturally remains upon the heart, whether sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. And morality, concentration, and wisdom naturally mature together. Without this fundamental spirit, practitioners eventually drift away under one excuse or another. Regardless of the justification they may give, inwardly they know that their aspiration for awakening was not yet deep enough. Without a great vow, how to practice cannot truly be sustained. This is not a practice for fulfilling worldly desires. It is a practice of letting go of everything. Now, let us look at the verse composed by the Zen master Heiin-shin regarding this heart. Pure gold refined again and again. Bright moon reflected in a clear pond. In north, south, east, and west. Who can judge superior? from in period. Last night, a single gust of spring wind arose, sweeping away the snow from 10,000 mountains. Now, let me add a short verse concerning this heart. Reeds spread thick along the river bank. But what lies beneath the water? Unless one enters the water directly, one remains merely a blind man with open eyes. Today, let's call it a day.